Hi, everyone. This is June the 20th. This is being recorded. SIG Federation meeting. We're starting with a slight delay. Not too sure why. You guys just started appearing with a 5-minute delay on our end. But I think we're at the point of discussing 1A priorities. And before we do that, on the video on our end, we have a new person in the room, Jesse, who joined us recently. He's, well, I'll let you say what you do for the project.
So I'm the kind of new transitioning manager for Federation and multi-cluster, along with storage as well. And Michael Rubin's working with him on transitioning over here on the Google side. I've been at Google for about 9.5 years on G Suite and Enterprise. And before that, a number of years elsewhere, I think about 16 years in industry, whole stack, back ends, front ends, you name it. So learning a lot, it's looking really cool.
Okay. So in terms of agenda, did we want to start? First off, I'm going to suggest whatever outstanding 1.7 items. Madhu's not with us today. What he's trying to do right now is chase down what is a regression or has appeared as a regression since Friday night in the CI constant integration test suite. It's kind of puzzling what's going on. So far, of the last 4 or 5 failures, they have not been Federation related. However, it's still on our kind of on our plate to prove that this is not the case. I don't have much details so far, and Madhu's not here, but all I know is that this happens under CI, but doesn't happen in the poll job, so it doesn't affect other people's ability to merge their own PRs, but we do show reds for every single test, when in actuality in CI, the control plane is not even being brought up correctly. So if anybody wants to join in on the debug effort, please reach out. So last week for 1.8 items, spreadsheet items, Marud, you had gone through the items that you wanted to see addressed from 1.8. Do you think you got sufficient response from the SIG, or did you want to continue speaking to those?
I think I probably just surprised everybody with a bunch of detail. If anybody has any thoughts about what I suggested or talked about last week, I'd be happy to hear them, either now or email or however anybody else wants to provide feedback. I do think we have way too much work to do. And the hard part isn't coming up with stuff to do, it's figuring out what is actually most important to tackle this cycle. And I think that'll have to be a collective effort to try to nail down what the priorities are. I mean, we all have, well, we have differing agendas, some of us, based on, what companies we're working for, how we're getting paid, whatever, but hopefully we can come to consensus on what we need to do, sort of the foundational stuff to move Federation forward.
Okay. Anybody from Huawei in lieu of Quentin being here? I know he's out today.
Yeah, so this is Deepak. Nobody, I think, if I'm mistaken, day off as well, a week off actually. So just wanted to circle back on the spillover, a couple of items, from 1.7, the jobs and the HPA thing. So I just wanted to find out where we are on that. We were almost set to go. That still pending to be merged, or we haven't started merging yet?
Code freeze has not been lifted.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
no. So HPA, I think, still needs a certain amount of review. I know Quentin's reviewed it, but I don't think Yeah, I think it needs a little bit
Yeah,
of
I
iteration.
remember, what's his name? Irfan mentioned that the replica set, the sync controller thing needs to be sorted out. It needs to be merged first, and then that was one of the outstanding thing as well. So I wonder, has that happened?
Again, we're not merging anything because
Okay,
code
okay,
freeze.
okay.
So
Got
once
it.
code freeze happens, replica sets, and then we can start iterating on HPA.
Okay.
As far as jobs goes, I think that my understanding is that's pretty close. I would like to make the requirement that we're going to merge jobs, but the PR author will be responsible for moving jobs to sync controller. Like that, I think that should be a requirement. We can merge it before that, but it has to be an immediate work item so that we don't.
Well, there are a bunch of other things that need to be done, the rebalancing and all that. So yes, we are planning to do follow on PR as well. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I guess it's kind of hard to prioritize things though in Quentin's absence, given that he's obviously a thought leader in this SIG.
So I saw the few comments, not a bunch of comments from you, and Irfan, he said he replied to that your stateful set, the federated stateful set as well. So I guess that's gonna be. So he's gonna come back and present it next week. I think that's what we planned.
I did a fairly thorough review yesterday, so hopefully that gives him some food for thought to update it before the review. And I've also asked Clayton Coleman, one of the architects of stateful sets, to chime in, because I'm not entirely sure that some of the changes related to global quorum are going to be in keeping with the design philosophy of stateful sets. I think there's certain sort of distributed systems fundamentals that stateful sets tries to achieve, and I don't see, it's not clear to me that the proposal as written today will actually maintain that same sort of capability, characteristic, whatever. So
yeah. Well, I think so next week he's going to do the presentation, going to go through that document. Is it possible to get Clayton as well in the meeting so that we can have all the Q&A and everything in that meeting?
I would like to see, I'm hoping we can communicate on that on the review in advance. I think there's enough holes in the design that I don't really want to see it reviewed as is. I want at least somebody, whether it be me or Clayton or somebody else, have a reasonable expectation that there's no major flaws in the design, and then have people go through and if there's some corner cases we've missed. But my concern today is we're kind of in the preliminary phase of the design. He's proposed something, and we have to sort of iterate on it and get it to a state where it could reasonably be expected to be implemented, and I just don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
Okay. Other than that, one of the designs that's had been getting some attention later in the cycle was reading status from Cube Resources. That was Huawei as well. So are you planning to present that at some point?
Which one is that again?
Reading Cube Resources.
Oh, I see. The read-only access, the accessing the underlying cluster resources.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on that briefly last week. It escapes me as to whether there was any consensus that proposal would cover sort of the aggregate status view, or there was just to access the underlying resources, like just exposing the API, basically. Can someone refresh my memory? Did I forget that we were going to do something about that, or did we just talk about it and there was no action item?
I think I do remember that there was a discussion last week. So I remember the Quentin had some comment. I forgot now, actually. I've been kind of sick the whole last week as well. So yeah. So did you get a chance to go through the document though, or
Yeah, no. I mean, I went to the document before the meeting last week and just noticed that it seemed to be focused on just allowing access at the API level. Oh, maybe the thing was that it seemed to me that there really was a need for a user experience discussion. if I'm a user and I want to see the status of like my replica set and see like where the replicas are distributed across which clusters, I probably don't want to have to make Kube API calls like via curl or something. I probably want like a client that actually will give me a summary view. And I mean, maybe that's just a follow-on, but I mean that's why I added it to the.
I think that's what the intent was. I remember the person who published the design document, Cindy. I think that's what the intent was. Or it should be abstraction. The abstraction should allow you to do that, though.
Well, allow is one thing, but actually expose it to the user is another. I guess my concern was that it was seemed to be narrowly focused on enabling access to the underlying clusters without actually providing a user experience. And I'm kind of like, well, how is that actually useful if a user can't really use it?
Did you put that comment in the document? Did you put that comment in the document itself?
No, I was just commenting.
Yeah, please do that. Then I can follow up with her as well. Yeah.
So that's something that effort should be targeting as well. Then it's not just like.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, do we want to rank? This is something we talked yesterday at the end of the last meeting as to whether at the level of the SIG we wanted to set a priority on all of what we want to tackle in the upcoming release. Then again, is Huawei sufficiently represented at this point, at this meeting?
Yeah, just other than the stateful set, we had, so the 3 of them are spillover from the previous one, and then the 2 new ones are the one we just discussed, the underlying cluster resources access, and the other one is the resource quota. That's pretty much it from our side.
Can we effectively prioritize without Quentin here?
I would wait. I mean, yeah. So I can just speak for the one we have. The Huawei has it, but other than that, I mean, I'm not in a position to do that, obviously.
I mean, if we think we can, then it seems reasonable to use this time to do that. But if we don't think we can, it doesn't seem worthwhile to do a bunch of prioritization and then have Quentin come back and redo the prioritization, when we could either use this meeting for something else or just have the time back to do work.
Yeah, I think I have the same thought. I mean, that said, I mean, if Quentin has input, we can always provide it next week. I mean, maybe we could narrow, I don't know. Like I said, the amount of work involved is so much more than we could possibly get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we still have this, I mean, maybe what we could do if it, like, could we groom the backlog and like, how many of these things are still pending and how many of them are just could be moved off? Because I think that's probably a precondition for seeing how much effort we're going to have to be able to do the new stuff in the now section.
That makes sense.
Is that something we need everybody to do, or like can we just have people go in and like remove the items that are actually completed? Do we have a completed section, or do we just delete them? I don't know. Probably makes sense to have a completed section. But like, I'm just not sure we need everybody involved. If something's done, move it. If it's not done, leave it there, and we can take it into consideration when we're doing priority.
I'm inclined to agree, but I don't. What do you think, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can assign priority, at least on the coarse grain between, low, medium, and high. And then if Quentin wants to go back afterwards, he can do so.
Okay.
Before we jump into that, this is John Bowman from Core DNS.
Yes.
A couple weeks ago, we talked about an alternative federation design that we were putting together, and I think we had planned to present that next week. I wanted to make sure we were still on deck for that.
Can you provide more details on, maybe I missed something? Alternative design for
the federated DNS, rather than using an external DNS provider. We have a different mechanism that we had proposed. In addition, an additional mechanism, I guess you could say, an alternative. And we spoke about it in this meeting 2 weeks ago, and I sent something out over the mailing list a while back. So I don't know if people had a chance to. A number of people have reviewed it, but maybe Christian, you weren't in on that.
Okay, I guess we'll just put you in the schedule for next week then.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I noticed, I guess while we were figuring this out, somebody went in and assigned effort to each of the items, which is fine. So whoever's doing that, do they want to?
I'm just guessing. Sorry.
That's fine. Gigantic is interesting measure.
You want to put some different thing, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be really painful.
Ginormous.
Gargantuan.
Gargantuan.
Sisyphean.
I think that's probably the best, yeah.
So in terms of stateful sets, I guess I'd lean on either or both Maru and Huawei to qualify that.
You're talking about the effort or the priority?
The priority. I say that mostly because we haven't seen much, much user request for it. Anything that's stateful. We've been mostly focused on stateless.
I think it's hard to just sort of go like thumb in the wind and say the priority is this without considering some of the other things. To my mind, stateful sets is certainly useful for a certain percentage of users, but like I think of Cube without stateful sets, it's useful for a lot of things. And if Cube didn't have a lot of the productization niceties around it, stateful sets would not be a priority. And I'm kind of the opinion that we're kind of in that position with Federation where in the absence of like easy product, well, in the absence of a lot of things that make productization possible, stateful sets to me is kind of a lower priority. So I wouldn't put it higher than a medium, but I guess Huawei, given that your team is working on it, you might have a different opinion on that. It might be critical for you.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, because we spend a lot of cycles on that, and this is kind of important. From our perspective, it is kind of high because of the customer requirement as well. But yeah, so that's the reason we went through a lot of cycles to kind of go through, put together design document and all those things.
I guess the question would be like, at least from the Red Hat side, I'm seeing like a need for a lot of sort of foundational stuff so that we can productize and deliver something to customers that we can actually, support, upgrade, etc. I guess my question would be, and maybe this is a question more for Quentin, but like, is this just, does Huawei not have these same productization concerns? How are you supporting and maintaining like Federation in production today for your customers without some of the things that I've been talking about?
Things such as dedicated admin stuff and all that,
the documented upgrade procedure is like pretty foundational. I mean, if you don't have that, you have to tear something down and recreate it.
Well, I know, as I said, from our perspective, this is a very high kind of a priority requirement. But as I see other items on the list, so we need to kind of weigh in how do we kind of stack up against those items. So I mean, I don't want to, from that perspective, because the time and effort we have put in. So for keeping that in mind, I would consider high from our standpoint. But I think we can leave it as a medium for the time being, and then we can always kind of discuss that once Quentin comes in next week.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that you definitely have put a lot of work into that, but I think that like the amount of work that's gone into a feature and how important it is are orthogonal to each other. I think that the fact that if you've done a lot of work on something, that doesn't necessarily imply that it is important.
I agree.
It just implies that you've done a lot of work. I mean, so I think that those two things are independent.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that. So that's what I'm saying. Let's put that as a medium for the time being, and then we can always kind of deliberate next week.
Okay.
Hi.
I'd weigh in on the next one, version skew. I think that goes to what Maru was saying about foundational. We just kind of started touching on this in the last cycle because we've mostly assumed that people will deploy their federation alongside whatever the latest version is of Kubernetes. But in a world where you have cluster admins, which are loosely connected to I guess individual operators of Kubernetes, this starts being more of an issue. So I think it's pretty high priority for anyone who wants to productize a version of Federation.
Yeah, it's definitely Red Hat's perspective. We want to see this happen in 1.8 for sure.
All right, silence is golden. I guess this is the flip side too, right? The documented upside procedure, upgrade procedure, sorry.
I think this is also a pretty high priority. I don't think that it's that much work necessarily. There just needs to be, it needs to be documented, it needs to be possible. Right now, we just kind of, we just deploy a new cluster.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's going to get interesting once we start trying to understand whether this is a cross-functional effort throughout the main stakeholders in the SIG. I've been bringing up version skew as a major issue, and Maru, you tried to get Huawei to explain kind of what their perspective is with respect to stateful sets and how they do upgrades. I don't know, maybe Quentin will provide a better or more complete view on this and what it is for their customers. Deepak, do you think?
Yeah, he can do that next week.
Okay.
So maybe like next week we can sort of go over.
Just go over again one more time.
Yeah, and then he can justify or explain why these priorities are relevant or not for Huawei's view.
Makes sense.
Okay.
I would say this next one's like medium, but I don't think it's very hard. So I would expect this to get in 1.8. But this basically means that if I have a deployment with 3 replicas, I will get a deployment with 3 replicas in every cluster that is targeted rather than trying to spread it, which is, I think that's a use case we have for some customers. So it should be pretty trivial to implement though. Just like a flag basically on the federated object.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it depends. If you're fine with an annotation, it's trivial. But if we want anything else, it goes back to the same debate we've been having.
Well, that's the next item.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just wanted to clarify for this item, annotation is fine, right?
If that's what we
Yeah,
end up doing, sure. I mean, my hope would be is that we make progress on federated preferences, and then we have an option to not use annotations. But really, for the feature itself, it doesn't really matter. I think that annotation versus non-annotation is more of a like. Yeah.
It's a top level question for most of our rights.
Agreed.
Yeah. So
I think I would underscore though that this very feature request kind of speaks to the fact that there's somewhat of a hole in the features provided by some of these workload types, in that we have cluster selectors that you can deploy over selective clusters. Then you can tell the user go directly to the underlying API server, which kind of defeats the purpose of federation. And then this one is yet a third one, which has kind of fallen through the cracks, which we're kind of putting a Band-Aid on through annotations. That's a little bit unfortunate.
we'll solve it all with the magic bullet of federation preferences. When that's implemented, everything will just work magically according to customer requirements.
Forever.
So with that in
So I guess that
mind,
means
I'm
federation preferences is
suggesting-
high priority.
I would suggest, yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Delegated off.
I'm gonna
I
say
can pick many things for this one.
medium. I mean, I think this is definitely this is going to be important for some Red Hat customers. I'm not entirely going to push it like as a high priority upstream though, because I think it's something we could probably do downstream for the most part, or do a little bit of work upstream and more down if we have to. And given that there's a lot of other high priority items, I don't really want to put this as high priority either. So I would say like a medium maybe.
Is this the same thing as integrate a single authentication
LDAP.
source? Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big chunk of work.
There was another item we had discussed related to this, was that Federation should be able to work on limited namespaces, like give it a service account point namespace.
I thought you were working on that. It was almost done.
Yeah, we didn't do it in 1.7.
But there was something about like how you would.
Yeah, we discussed it, but didn't end up doing it.
Oh, I thought that when I met you guys in May,
Yeah.
you were talking about having some preliminary work where you would be watching namespace by namespace, or at least you were going to think about doing that. So that didn't actually.
No.
Okay. That should definitely be on the list. I think that BC. I mean, I would call it maybe I don't know, partition federation or something like that, because you're federating selectively rather than just like all resources. Yeah, please put that in on the list. I think that's important. I don't think that I think that there's certainly some use cases where you just want to be able to federate everything, and then there's other use cases where you want to selectively do that and not give full access to the underlying cluster. I think it's primarily like a security thing and being able to partition access to member clusters between federation controlled and non-federation controlled. Yeah, I don't know what we want to call that. I mean, the gist is you're federating only on a namespace by namespace basis.
We could call it per namespace federation.
Per namespace, sure. So yeah, please add that.
RBAC.
Maybe Clayton can chime in. How important is RBAC support for Federation Control Plane in 1.8?
I guess the question is are the people using Federation today at the RBAC control plane level really hampered by anything other than binary access, like can access, can update, or can't? Would we have?
Yes.
I'm saying, like, how many people are using do you have multi-teams using RBAC or using Federation that couldn't just get away with ABAC today, for instance?
Oh, so what's ABAC versus RBAC? Can you?
ABAC's just a file that says these users can do these things, and you can do, required to have authentication, but you don't have to have anything else in order to. Here's the set of people who can access this federation.
Oh, so it's not like there's no selective permissions. There's just different users.
No, you can do selected permissions. I mean, it's basically what Cube started with before we had RBAC.
So I know that we have a request to prevent cluster, like the users who are like federating to member clusters. There's kind of like they need different access to users who are adding or removing clusters, so you don't accidentally, remove a cluster from federation or maliciously add a cluster. Is that something that could be done by ABAC then?
I think so.
Okay.
That with ABAC, you don't get API support. Like Clayton said, it's a static file.
Oh, yeah.
It might be a good place to start. I mean, you could put that in a config map and you're no worse off, for instance.
So maybe we need another line item, which is just like documented ABAC or document ABAC. I mean, I know it's available for Cube, but like I have seen some people asking about auth this week, saying like, how do I give somebody access to my federation? Do I just have to ship them my Cube config, which they thought was kind of suboptimal?
I think users are looking for a reference design, which right now they're not getting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's given that RBAC is going to be a lot more work, I would say like if we can have a documented solution for ABAC, that's like a starting point. And then as users become more sophisticated, we can prioritize RBAC. But right now, I don't think there's enough users that are really screaming for it to justify, devoting the effort required. I mean, that may change. Maybe that becomes a priority for Red Hat customers and we actually put resources on it. But I'm going to say that's like a lower medium for this cycle right now.
That config question too probably needs to be answered on Kubernetes core to a certain respect, right? It's not like we have an API that you can get the config from right now that I know of.
Well, if you're really doing multi-tenancy, you probably want to use delegated auth. Like you don't really want to extend the existing capability because you don't want to build LDAP on top of what Kube provides. You just want to use LDAP. I think.
Right. I meant for getting the config, like the Kube config though. Like if I need to pull down the config for a cluster somehow, I don't have a way of doing that other than sharing files really, do I? On the main core project.
I think that's true. Clayton?
I didn't know what you meant by main core project.
Kubernetes itself, not Federation.
I mean, you have multiple clusters integrated with your LDAP or your OIDC or whatever, and then you log into those directly. I mean, most people wouldn't ship around files at this point.
But there seems to be like a gap. There's like, hey, I just bootstrapped a cluster and I have some kube config files, and how do I get access to other people? And we have full-blown enterprise, and I have some sort of auth solution that I've integrated with.
To be fair, though, like I'll say a year ago, that might have been the case. Today, most people who bootstrap, who are doing anything other than just kicking the tires, will then go set up like a correct/delegated auth solution. There's probably fairly few people who aren't using delegated auth at this point.
Even with that, you still need to have the config file locally in order to get kube config to work, right? Your kube control.
No. I mean, like there's the login flows, and but I mean, certainly people would prefer we had a better kube login command. It's fairly limited today, so that stuff, yes.
Okay, I'll have to look that up because I'm not familiar with it. So thank you.
So maybe put RBAC support for now at low. We can revisit that if required, but right now, at least, I think we have a lot of other things that preclude making it a priority.
Right. I'd just like to point out from user discussions we've had, there's kind of two dimensions to this. There's do we federate RBAC in that, do we install the same RBAC rules on all the clusters that are controlled by the Federation control plane? Or do we support a federated RBAC only in the Federation control plane? And there has been requests for both. Like some people want individual rules on some of the clusters, so just blindly copying them with the sync controller, for example, would not be a solution.
So maybe we need two items then, and this one I was more intending for like controlling like authorization for the Federation control plane, not federating RBAC resources.
And actually, it depends on what we want to do by default. We could use the sync controller to do both with cluster selectors. So like by default, it will configure all the underlying clusters, but you can add a cluster selector so that it's only for federation. And you can still use just the basic sync controller to do this.
But would you add a cluster selector on an individual RBAC rule?
Yeah, that would be if we decide to say the default is that it spreads to all clusters.
So is cluster selector the only way to do that?
Yeah,
I know that Shashi was talking about adding like an is federation, basically a flag for his leader election work.
But we decided since there's already support for cluster selector, we'll just reuse cluster selector. We didn't add another annotation.
Okay.
All right.
So whoever works on this, if we decide to use the same mechanism, then do both.
Okay. Moving Federation out of tree. I guess as good stewards, somebody should be looking at this. There are other groups that are slowly moving out of core. There's no reason for Federation to be in the core. The only reason right now seems to be historical and a lack of kind of effort and time for people to move it out. And yeah, gigantic, I think I agree with, mainly because, at least from my perspective, there's a lot of unknown. So it's large plus unknown, so maybe that equals gigantic. And I know kubectl is doing this right now, so maybe we wait until they're done.
Well, let's say low, at least for 1.8. That would be my suggestion. I think that the other thing that's related to this is how we decide to, like, it's tied to Federation preferences. Like if we decide to just continue using cube types in the Federation control plane, that sort of is a very different approach than, oh, we're going to actually create Federation specific types so that we can have Federation specific fields without having to mess with the cube native types. So it's kind of, yeah, there's a lot of things involved in that that I think we need to think about, even if we don't actually end up doing the work this cycle.
And I'd like to add that there are a few advantages we get by moving out the repo. Like we can add our own owners. Right now, I think the requirement is you have to be you have to be part of the org for 3 months. And that's why we cannot add existing SIG members as owners or reviewers to our owners file. But if you are out of repo, we get full flexibility of adding that. And I know 6 CLI is planning to add kubectl out, but the API machinery team is also working on adding or moving the API types out of the repo. And Clayton would obviously know more, but I think they've already moved a lot of the stuff out. So like there are already people who've done this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely do not underestimate the scope of this, but it is easier than it was. I think because of the depth of the Federation control plane overlap in code, Service Catalog definitely took the hit on some of the controller stuff and some of the API server stuff, but Federation also touches a lot more core code and reuses a lot more. That would probably be the biggest worry I could imagine. Like the namespace deletion controller code, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. Component config, I think that's yours.
I'm going to say this is low, but from a productization perspective, being able to actually have, maybe a web UI or something interact with the configuration for the controller manager without having to parse the template and try to figure out which parameters are being set. I think this would be important, but I'm going to say low for now. If we can get resources on it and it becomes a priority for Red Hat as part of productization, then we might bump that, but I don't think anybody else is worried about it right now because nobody's building UI around this stuff yet.
Okay. I'll just quote it for Federation of RBAC. It seems to be at the same level of RBAC support.
Yeah.
I actually don't understand, why do we have two different stuff? Do you mean the first one is adding RBAC rules for underlying clusters, and this is RBAC rules in Federation?
So RBAC for off the Z for FCP, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then Federation of RBAC is actually, Federation of RBAC resources is actually propagating to the underlying clusters. Does that make more sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I got nothing left on the agenda.
It's a piece of cake. We should totally be able to get all of this work done. So I mean, especially the high priority items, I'm hoping we can start working on them like this week or next. Not necessarily, I mean, obviously Quinn has to chime in. But to my mind, like the 3-4 high priority items here, I think those are pretty critical. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we should waste any time in getting started and start having, design, discussion, preliminary implementation. The goal is to get these done well before the code freeze, because they impact a lot of the other work.
Yeah.
And it's guaranteed if something's a high priority and large, it's going to take a lot more time than we actually think. So optimism doesn't really have a place here as much as I like to assume it does. I guess the action item for everybody who has something in the backlog, if you're the owner of something in the backlog or the reviewer, maybe make sure, can we make a section like down lower that's like done or something? Or do we just want to delete it? What's the procedure here?
Like Quentin said, he'd move the.
Yeah, I think we generally delete whatever is done. Just
Oh, because it's right, because it's already it's still in the Q17, Q2 tab. Okay, so if you have something that's in that list and is done, please delete it and maintain things going forward. If you finish something, remove it. I think that should be kind of like grooming this list of things should probably be like the first thing we do, or one of the first things we do each meeting, just so that we're clear on where we're at.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't done that in the past, but that does make sense. Anything else, or can we?
Yeah, Maru, this is Deepak. So please provide your feedback in the document for the reading cube resources thing. Remember the one we talked about?
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah, then I'll follow up with once I have that thing in the document, I'll follow up with the designer, Cindy.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, we have John in the schedule next week. And I guess no other design reviews.
Are we going to go look at stateful sets again? Who's that?
Do we want to put stateful sets in?
Yes, I'm hoping we actually have time to iterate on that. I'm hoping that you, Clayton, you have a chance to take a look at it as well, and maybe even come to the design review. Like to sort of understand what global quorum means with respect, like how global quorum is related to local quorum, whether we can relax some of the constraints that were put on stateful sets when it's federated and the way that's being proposed. Anyway, yeah.
So we'll do stateful sets and
Oh, yeah, maybe not stateful sets just yet. So,
okay.
John, and we'll probably, we had an opportunity recently to meet up with some of our customers in Federation world, touch base on what they were using in terms of features, and we'll have an update for the group next week. So that's it. We sign it off.
All right. Thank you for getting me on the schedule.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.